On today's show, we'll be joined by weekly co-host Alykhan Bijani to discuss the hierarchy on this Houston Rockets team. What is the current hierarchy? Does one exist? And what should be the hierarchy for guys like Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr. to succeed at the highest level? Plus, Devin Booker, injured and out for the next month. Does that make it more or less likely that we see an Eric Gordon trade to the Phoenix Suns? And what would that trade look like? All that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as Rockets Watch. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. The show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can help the show out tremendously by commenting anything below. For today's episode, what do you think the hierarchy is on this Houston Rockets team? Let me know in the YouTube comments. Do read each and every one of those every single day. And joining us now is your weekly co-host, the X's and O's man himself, Alykhan Bijani. You can follow on Twitter at Rockets_Insider. And on today's show, we're going to try and figure out what is the best system moving forward, or I guess what should be the best hierarchy for this Rockets team moving forward, because it doesn't really feel like they have a clearly defined hierarchy or pecking order, and I think that is one of the issue. I think there are maybe some of the guys on the roster have a, clear definition in their roles and how the organization, how the coaching staff want to utilize them. But I think other guys don't. And I think that kind of ambiguity is why this team kind of struggles on a game-to-game basis, Alykhan, with figuring out who they're going to get involved, who has the hot hand or how they're going to feed certain guys. And I think this last kind of little 2-game sample that we have where Alperen Sengun was really, really good and was almost a focal point of the Rockets offense against the Bulls, and then almost a non-factor against the Boston Celtics. Some of that has to do with matchup. Some of that has to do with, quality of opponent, all these different things, the specific guys that were defending Alp in the Boston game versus the Chicago game. But at the same time, I think some of it comes down to just, the Rockets don't have a clearly defined identity of making sure that they're going to go to XYZ guy and that this is the pecking order or whatever. So let's break this down a little bit. Give me your initial thoughts on the Rockets hierarchy or lack thereof, for their guys offensively. We're just focused on offense here.
Lob threat.
Lob threat.
Okay.
Threat.
I had to get that out of the way. I want to read a stat out. It'll come up later. I just want to read it out there.
Okay.
The Rockets are 2 of 29 without Eric Gordon since the start of last season.
That's not good.
Okay, then let's get back to your question.
That's really bad.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. Let's get back to your question. The lack of a hierarchy, can be looked upon in 2 ways. One is, okay, you're going into it, it's game-to-game matchups. You're allowing the matchups to dictate who has the ball. You have multiple guys who can handle the basketball. You're allowing them, based off who's hot, to get going, things like that. But where it's a disadvantage is when you're playing lineups or new lineups, or let me go back to that first point. Lineups that haven't played extensive minutes together, or new lineups entirely. It doesn't mean that you're going to have the same success. You're going to have issues with communication, especially defensively, which if the Rockets can get stops, it allows them to go out in transition, which they are significantly better at in transition versus the half court. And the plus minus the net rating numbers prove that correctly. And I just think right now, I think it's getting time to start to establish what is your focal point going to be offensively in terms of getting the offense going. There can't be games, Jackson, where you have Alperen Sengun as the connector at the perimeter and he's kind of getting things going and then he'll post up a little bit. And then you have games where he's just a pick and roll guy, and you're not really looking for him whenever he has those mismatches. I will give the Rockets credit though. I think one to your point about him not being involved, I think that first quarter versus the Celtics, they made a concerted effort in his first stint on the court to get him the ball. I mean, I called Jabari Smith hot potato, I think last week or a week or 2 weeks ago or something. And he's been playing much better. He's not just looking to shoot every time he touches the ball. I've seen him go through a process. He's recognizing where his teammates are as well. And he's had chances where he could have jacked it up 2 weeks ago. He would have done that. But the last 2 games, he's seen, Alp has a small on him. Let me give him the ball. Let me try to feed him. And I think even though he's not there yet, Jabari has the potential to be the best post-entry player on the team just because of his height and how he can dump the ball right into the pocket of where Sengun wants it. But I'm saying all this because, we're discussing the hierarchy of this team almost 40% of the season in. We have no idea who's the alpha. We have no idea who's the secondary guy. And we have no idea who's a tertiary guy.
Well, in that regard, I do think we know who the top 2 guys are. We just don't know which one is the alpha and which one is the secondary guy on a given night. And I think that's because those first 2 guys are very clearly Jalen and Kevin to some extent.
So that means this offense centers around guard play versus centering around a guy who can get you baskets out of the post.
Yes.
Okay. I mean,
I was waiting for your follow-up on that. It sounded like you were getting ready to deliver a juicy point off of that, and it just was very anticlimactic.
Sengun, and I have to give the Celtics credit because this became a whole talking point during the Celtics game. Marcus Smart is very big. He's thick. He knows how to get in there.
Thick with how many C's?
With 4 or 5 C's, I guess. We're upcoming on the anniversary of when Marcus Smart drew 2 charges against James Harden in the finals.
Oh, we don't know. Stop. Why are you going to take us down? This is PTSD. Why are you going to drag us down memory lane?
But the reason I'm bringing up Marcus Smart, I think Marcus Smart was a significant reason why Alperen Sengun did not get going. And what the Celtics did was they allowed him to get the ball in the post. And when he tried to settle down and take a dribble or at least survey, they brought the double team immediately over and got him to pass it out, right? And so I think that also took him out of his rhythm. And then KPJ got going when they brought in the lob threat. And when the lob threat is in there, it allows KPJ to have that lane to be able to take advantage. And he got to the lane pretty effectively yesterday, right? So when KPJ gets going, you don't have Jalen Green coming back into the 6 or 5 minute mark of the second quarter. He's already struggling in that first half. I think there's merit to what you're saying. Any given night, it's going to be one of KPJ or Jalen get going. And I think yesterday was a great against the Celtics was a great example. It was a tale of 2 halves. First half, it was clearly KPJ. And the second half, it was Jalen Green, especially that third quarter where he had 18 points. So, I think if you're asking me, we can get into this the next segment. Right now, if I were to establish an ideal hierarchy, it would be Jalen, Alperen Sengun, and then Kevin Porter Jr.
I agree with that. I think that should kind of probably be the basis for this Houston Rockets team. The numbers are really interesting. I pulled up the numbers from the first 3 months of the season and segmented them by month. So October, November, and through December to this point, they've got a couple games left in this month. Looking at kind of just the shot attempts, right? The shot diet and shot distribution for this team. We'll take a look at that coming up here in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Now, Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Over 80% of people have subscriptions that they completely forgot about. Look, I hate to admit it, but it's happened to me before, right? Maybe it's that streaming service that you bought into just to watch that one show, or maybe it's a free trial that you never remember to cancel, right? It happens to the best of us. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones that you don't want or need anymore. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions with one click. It is that simple. And manage all your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you making Locked On Rockets your first listen every day. Make sure to go check out Locked On Sports Today for your second listen. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Alykhan, the numbers that I pulled up here, I think they kind of track with what we've seen so far to this season. So on the season as a whole, and there are a few different metrics to how we can, maybe try to contextualize the hierarchy of this team, right? You could look at usage, you could look at touches. What I decided to pull up was field goal attempts. What does the shot diet look like for this Rockets team? Fair. And month to month, we'll start with October. So, small slate of games in October. So had 8 games. Jalen Green led the team in field goal attempts in October with 18.8 attempts per night. Kevin Porter Jr. was second with 16.9 attempts per night. Jabari Smith Jr. was third with 11.9 attempts. Eric Gordon was fourth with 10.8 attempts. And then Alperen Sengun was fifth with 10.2 attempts per night. So those are your 5 starters, and that's the order in which they were getting their shots through October. Now, things changed pretty drastically or actually, I shouldn't say drastically, but things changed a little bit in November. Jalen Green still top of the pecking order, 16.2 attempts per game. KPJ second, again, 14.9 attempts per game. Alperen Sengun was up at third, although his attempts didn't really vary all that much. He was, he got an extra 0.6 attempts per night, so 10.8 attempts per game for Alp. But Jabari and Eric's attempts dropped. Jabari was down to 10.3 attempts, and then Eric was down at 8.8 attempts per night. And then we go to this most recent month, December, and we still have the same 2 at the top of the pecking order, Jalen and Kevin. Jalen very much clearly leading the way and is very clear as day, the focal point, the number 1 guy for the team, 18.3 attempts. KPJ, 15.7. Jabari Smith Jr. back up over Alperen Sengun at 11.2. Alperen Sengun down to 9.6 attempts in the month of November, and then Eric Gordon down to 9.4. So those are your 5 starters. Those are the guys you expect to take the majority of shots, on a night-to-night basis. But it's very clear that the 2 guys at the top of the pecking order haven't varied all season, right? It's Jalen and it's Kevin. And I think you and I are both in agreement here that for the Rockets to be at their best and to capitalize on the talent that they have on this roster, we'd like to see Sengun probably be utilized a bit more and be that second, guy in the hierarchy as far as threat to, score the ball, reps, whatever, getting those offensive having the offense go through him a bit more.
I will say that, the shot attempts, and I get the point and I get the argument there. I will say that I'm not as worried about the shot attempts as I'm worried about the front court touches. And what I mean by that is I would like to see more of Alp touching the ball when the ball crosses the half court compared to when it's Jalen and KPJ initiating. There is specific offensive actions where you can put the ball in your big's hands at the top of the key and let them initiate it. There's an action called delay, right? When a big gets the ball at the top of the key, then he reverses and he gets into a dribble handoff action or pitch action. That's something that Mike D'Antoni made famous. Rockets ran with James Harden here, and then the Rockets also continue to use it today in the flow of their offense. And if you look at the first play of the game, back when the Rockets played against Chicago, you will see an example of delay action. Now, why I'm saying this as important is because Alp, when he's at the top of the key and he's touching the ball, he does a few things. One, he's forcing that big to come defend. Not because Alp is going to shoot the ball, but because Alp is involved as that screener and a guy who's initiating everything. So the big cannot just step back. He has to be able to hug a little more closely. Second, when Alp's up top and he's setting the screen, you likely have Jabari spacing out, which is good because Jabari, especially from the corners, is giving you optimal spacing. teams are playing closer to him. If you watch it from the eye test, teams are playing closer to him when he's in the corner versus when he's in the slot. And I think that's something, there's a reason why the Rockets are putting him a lot more in the corner, and the Rockets are making a concerted effort to get him the ball in the corner as well off of these passes these last few games, especially since our last podcast that we did. And next is when Sengun has the ball, it allows Jalen or KPJ to come off a running start, right? They're coming around the edge, and maybe with a secondary screen if they're running delay action or some sort of 21 series or some sort of action that way where there's 3 players involved. They're coming off essentially two screens with an advantage over their perimeter defender, and it allows them to be able to get into the paint and get up a shot that's effective or make the pass. And when the Rockets are doing that, they do a few things. One, they're getting their best ball handlers in positions where they have an advantage, which is something Steven South has talked about since he first came to Houston. Second, what that does is that it allows you to be able to move the ball side to side. When you're moving the ball side to side, right, that makes the defense have to leave their assigned spot. They can't play in a shell. We've heard the term shell defense. We've used it on the show. I'm sure our audience has heard it when it comes to broadcast. Shell defense is essentially where you're protecting the basket, right? Your defense is in a set position and you're trying to protect the paint. You're trying to protect the basket, okay? You're not trying to break that shell. But if you move the ball side to side, it allows more opportunities for you as an offense to break that shell. And it usually happens when we're watching the games when Alpi has the ball and he's that connector between transition, if the Rockets can't get anything going, and then going into a dribble handoff or some sort of a half-court action.
Now, on your point about the touches and specifically the front court touches, I wanted to grab the numbers just so we could reference them really quick. On the season as a whole, do you think it matches the eye test? Like, how would you, if you had to guess right now who the top 5 in touches are in order, how would you?
I would definitely say it's Kevin Porter Jr.
Okay.
Jalen first, actually. Then
okay.
I would say, because KPJ loves getting to the paint. He tries his best to, at least. That's what I would see. Jalen is second. I would then venture to say Eric Gordon or Jabari Smith are third, and then Alpi is fourth. And it maybe has gotten better over the course of the season, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you see, Jackson?
So for the season as a whole, it's actually Jalen Green has the most front court touches, 34.1 per game. Kevin Porter Jr. second, right behind him, 33.9. Alp is third at 32.8 front court touches per game.
Fantastic.
And then Eric Gordon is fourth at 24.2 front court touches. And then that's the season as a whole. And I did pull up the front court touches just for here in December, just so the most recent month. Jalen Green still leading the way, 35.5 front court touches. Kevin Porter Jr. right behind him at 34.5 front court touches. And then Alperen Sengun still third at 29.7. And then further down the list, KJ Martin actually just slightly above Eric Gordon in front court touches at 22.7, and then EG is fifth at 22.5.
Well, I will tell you why that is with KJ. His screens per game has increased, not drastically, but if we look at month to month, he's setting a lot more screens for Jalen and KPJ, and he's been getting to the rim a lot. I mean, we saw that versus Boston. I mean, he was incredible the way he was putting pressure. It was 1-2 dunk, 1-2 layup, 1-2 pass. And what I mean by 1-2, just one step, second step, and boom, he knew where he was going with it. Decisive, didn't hesitate, athletic. I mean, it was fantastic to watch, to a point where when Kevin Porter Jr. runs a pick and roll with KJ Martin, 1.52 points per possession for the team. Very impressive. The Sengun thing is really interesting to me because I did a video, I did a film study on this, and you can find this on my TikTok or on my Twitter, where I kind of broke down what Alpi is doing a lot more recently, and he's been running a lot more Jalen Sengun, dribble handoffs, which allow him to be able to get to the paint a lot more to make passes or get post position, right? And if he's able to get post position against a non-set defense, right, which happens whenever you force a switch and you're able to kind of do all these things, he's finding the guys in the corners and the wings, and a lot of that times it's Jabari. Jabari, he's been assisted by Sengun second most on the team. So I see these things happening. I see these habits forming, and I just want to push back a little bit about the whole thing with the Celtics game. I think most of it has to do with the fact that you had KPJ going, And when KPJ gets going, you're going to put him in optimal position to continue to be hot, which is when you have Bruno in there as that lob threat, right? And then you have Alperen Sengun. Whenever in the early part of the game, he was the one who got the Rockets off to that hot start, honestly, when they went on that quick run. And then, I mean, the Celtics hit those back-to-back threes with Jalen and Jason, who were incredible. But Alp is the one who was making those passes, initiating, right? So I think if we're looking at yesterday, offensively, ideally, you want all three of them on at the same time, which I think is what you would prefer as for a young team. But also for a young team, it's going to take some time. When one guy has it on, how do the other two respond? Right? How is Alp responding and playing alongside them? Is he in getting post-up position, or is he trying to in lane? Is he trying to seal driving lanes for KPJ? Jalen, if he's not going, but he knows KPJ is Jalen setting those ghost screens to be able to create mismatches? Is he running in transition, putting pressure on the defense so KPJ gets a mismatch? How are they playing well off each other, right? I don't want this to, as much as I'm discussing hierarchy, we're discussing hierarchy, you and I also want us to make the point that even if one of them is on their game, the other two have a responsibility to the team and to themselves in order to even for themselves to get some rhythm to do those little things. Because if their teammate gets going, right, and then the defense over the course of the game will shift the attention to that specific player who's going, opens up more opportunities for you to be able to be successful. And as of right now, that next gear, I think Ryan Hollins talked about it during the broadcast yesterday. The Rockets have that second gear. We didn't see it yesterday. That second gear, in my opinion, is when the Rockets do that. When they know somebody's going, or when they know two of the three are going, and the other player or players are helping each other get going, and then eventually over the course of the game get their opportunities as well.
Coming up, final thoughts here, and I'm going to have a big. I'm going to put Alykhan on the spot here at the top of segment 3 as we kind of wrap up our discussion about the Rockets hierarchy. Plus, Phoenix Suns are going to be without Devin Booker for the next month. Does that create an opening for the Rockets to maybe deal one Eric Gordon out to the desert? We're going to talk about that, but first, today's episode is brought to you by NHTSA. Now, look, it can happen so easily, right? You're out with your friends or your coworkers, you're putting back a few drinks, right? Just having a good time. Everybody's having a good time. A few drinks becomes a few too many. It's time to go, and for a split moment, you're like, I should probably call a ride. But then you're like, you know what? Nah, you're a good driver, right? You haven't had that much to drink. You live nearby. You could make it home okay. Any number of excuses, right? What are the odds that you'll even get pulled over? And even so, what's the worst that can happen? You lose your license. Maybe you lose your job. Total your car. Maybe you kill someone. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's life forever. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. Drive sober or get pulled over. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, Alykhan, you brought up a good point there at the end of the last segment, and so I'm going to put you on the spot here in this one.
Lob threat.
Yeah, there you go.
Lob threat.
For each of the big three, right? For Jalen, for Kevin, and for Alpi, if you had to pinpoint the one thing that each one of those guys can do, that they can bring to the table, aside from their ability to just score the basketball, right, to get a bucket, what would you identify as the things that they need, or the number one thing that those guys, each of those guys, need to be doing on the court on any given game to help the other two out, right? So that trifecta, that trio, can all feed off of one another on a game-to-game basis.
That is a terrific question, and something that I'm going to say a few things. Say one that they do well, and one thing I would like them to do better. Does that work? Is that better?
Sure.
I'm going to start with LP. One thing he does well is he does a great job as a connector. He still tries, whenever he gets the ball on the roll, to make that pass on the post, to maybe make a pass. He still finds a way to be a good connector for that team, right? When they're moving, or one of the guys that has to go in as the ball handler. One thing I want him to get better at, because he's good at setting screens and he's gotten better at diving on those screens and not getting in the way of his ball handler, is learning how to shield the lane. And what I mean by shielding is something that Daniel Tice made famous with the Rockets, or we saw more of when Daniel Tice used to do it with his big body and big frame, is that he would essentially wall off the defender from coming from either the big defender or the weak side shot block or weak side defender rotating over from getting into that lane. So it opened up more of a window for a ball handler to be able to score. So kind of like shielding an area of the court that a defender can get by, using your body to do that. Alpi has
almost like a moving back screen, right? Sort of.
Yeah, I'm almost like a moving back screen, but instead your back is to the people you're trying to block, and you're just putting your hands out there side to side and trying to just shield it away. Very sly. It's a very quick, sly move that won't be called for a moving screen, but you're also just kind of blocking off, setting your territory for a potential rebound or whatever the case may be. That's one thing I would like to see him get better at. KPJ. One thing I think KPJ does a good job of, he actually does. Maybe sometimes he doesn't, but a good number of times he does. I think this criticism is unfair for it. He does get the ball in positions where his teammates can get going. If he sees Jalen get going like yesterday, he got the ball in Jalen's hands, or he get the ball in Alpi's hands. So I want to give him credit for that. However, if they are going, I need him to not look to dribble. And what I mean by that is if he gets the ball in the catch when defenses are scrambling, I need him to shoot the ball because he's best at those catch and shoot threes. So whether it's Jalen or Alp and the defense is collapsing on them and KPJ has a moment, even if the guy's running hard at contest, shoot that KPJ. You have an excellent catch and shoot percentage. You are very good at it. Shoot it. It gets your confidence going up, gets your rhythm going up. And if the defense also has to allocate for you and they're staying with you, that allows you to be able to attack harder closeouts or be able to get going against mismatches. So that's what I like to see from Kevin Porter Jr. For Jalen, for me, the thing that Jalen does a good job of is that he runs in transition. And that's really important because when you run in transition, you put pressure on the defense to be able to get back. And also if you run in the middle or you run the side and somebody's already there, that takes away somebody else from another defender, kind of puts the team in disarray and getting into a set defense. Jalen does a good job of kind of running, so he's good at that. One thing I want to see him get better at is recognizing mismatches. When he thinks he has a favorable mismatch versus somebody else, but the other person has a hot hand, give the ball back to the person with the hot hand. Yeah, I get it. You got a mismatch on you, but ultimately, it's a back and forth kind of thing. I get it. But if, let's say, KPJ is getting going or LP is getting going, I know Jalen wants to get going too, but I think the ball will find you if you make the right play. And Jalen most times makes the right play. And I trust Jalen. I think he should be a primary ball handler. We should view him as a primary ball handler moving forward. But sometimes as a team, when you're moving side to side, sometimes it's better to give the ball up if you're not shooting as well as somebody else is.
I think one thing that kind of ties all of that together is almost like this. There's a level of unselfishness or a trust factor there that's kind of in play, where when these guys, when we see these guys playing a more, and it's not that Kevin is selfish and it's not that Jalen is selfish, right? These guys are very clearly the 1 and 2 options for the team. The coaching staff want them taking the majority of shots, all that. But when those guys have the recognition and the awareness to then get their teammates better involved, especially early in the game, right? Hitting LP on the roll, finding KJ Martin when he cuts backdoor, those little moments where you can get other guys involved and early in the game. I feel like that then feeds into itself to where then other guys feel, they're flowing a bit more offensively. They're trying harder on defense. When you're trying harder on defense, you get more stops, you get those opportunities to be out in transition. And it really does start with Kevin and Jalen, because yes, those guys are supposed to take the majority of their shots. They're supposed to get 15, 20, 25 attempts a night. We get it. But if you're only looking for your shots and if you're only looking to score the ball and not looking to get your teammates involved, that's when the offense will stagnate. That's when we, see the team kind of devolve into those isolation possessions, whatever. The rock isn't moving side to side, all of that. So
I will say though, Jackson, to your point, if you want to look at growth from this Rockets team, watch the game versus the Bulls and watch the game versus the Celtics, especially that first quarter. You will see growth from this team. They moved the ball side to side. They got the ball to people who can help them be successful. And it was much more of a trust kind of game. It was a very good trust building game, in my opinion. And I think that's what we can ask for. We want to see it more consistently, obviously. But for me to see that for an entire game versus Chicago, and especially in that first quarter versus Boston, and then eventually they did some of that also in the third and fourth quarter offensively. But to see that for a 2-game stretch, that's exciting to me because it's a back-to-back, and they didn't give up on it the following night. And that's something good to look forward to.
Didn't give up on the following night against the best team in the NBA. It's important to put that context on there. Right?
It could have won if Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown missed a few threes. They were on fire, man.
God, those two are so good. Last thing here, we'll throw in here at the very end of the episode, but there was that little bit of news. It's unfortunate, but Phoenix Suns star Devin Booker will be missing the next 4 weeks, reportedly by Shams Charania of The Athletic. And look, it's crazy, Alykhan, because it's almost like the Suns, if there was, maybe there's just some guy out there. I don't know. I can't think of any names off the top of my head, but just like a stabilizing veteran presence that the Suns could trade for, potentially a guy who's been on the market for a little while that the Suns could trade for to help kind of, I don't know, buoy their team a little bit here over this next month and also give them a much needed boost into the postseason this year. Are any names come to mind for you?
CP needs his guy Gordy. I mean, it makes so much sense. The chemistry look, the reason why D'Antoni's system used to work so well out of pick and roll when CP and Eric and Clint played together was because CP loved finding Eric as much as he loved finding Clint on those dribble handoffs and those 21 series and all these different actions they used to run. So I would love to be able to see CP have Eric there as that slot safety valve. And you have Landry Shamet, who's been playing well for them, who's out right now, but you have Landry Shamet. You can have Eric Gordon playing alongside CP for a bench unit. Give them a Loptard and Biyombo, and you can kind of replicate some of the success that you had for those minutes, for those splits of minutes off the bench, like they had in Houston. And I think it's something that the Phoenix Suns should seriously consider. Now, are there players that I'm looking at that I would want in return? Heck yeah, man. You know who I want? I want Mikal Bridges. That's what I want. I know. I'm not getting it.
Look, Christmas has already passed, Alykhan, so it's too late to put Mikal Bridges. No, but here, I want to, and you know what? We'll end on this note because I don't know if I'm completely off base here, but there's been a lot of speculation that the Suns probably aren't going to be willing to pay Cam Johnson this upcoming offseason, right?
Gimme.
What if instead of the return being a draft, draft pick, draft capital, whatever for the Suns, like, is there a trade that makes sense where the Suns could deal like Dario Saric and Cam Johnson to the Rockets if the Suns have zero interest in extending Cam Johnson this offseason? Yeah, you lose his services for the rest of this season whenever he does get back into the flow of things. You also don't know what he's going to look like when he gets back from injury, but the Rockets could take a flyer on him, have him for half a season, and then reevaluate this summer and decide if they want to pay him long term. I would love for the Rockets to take a flyer on Cam Johnson and have him be in the rotation, even for, post-injury Cam Johnson, half a season, see if he's still got it, and then decide this summer if you want to, extend a big offer his way. I think that would be a huge win for the Rockets.
I think a couple things would need to happen for that to happen. First, you need to figure out what you want from Kenyon Martin Jr. And I was just about to say Kevin Martin. Oh my God, my old Rockets ad just came out. I meant Kenyon Martin Jr. I think you need to figure out what his role is going to be. Is he going to be a rolling big? Is he going to be your 3 because he's played 3 as a starter? Is he going to be a 4? I mean, we got to figure out where he's going to be at. It's great for him to be a connector, and I made that Dwight Powell comparison. Dwight can play that 4 to the 5 for Dallas. Now with Kleber out, Dwight Powell is filling in that role really well. But, what is KJ Martin's role going to be? Then when you look at that, and you bring Cam Johnson here, who shoots better from 3, honestly, than KJ, are you going to put more of a premium on Cam Johnson shooting or KJ's rolling ability and the ability to kind of do a lot of the different things you want with his athleticism? So those are 2 questions I want to keep in mind if that is potentially an option. Jackson, I hope you can keep that in mind, and I want our listeners to keep that in mind. And over the course between now and the trade deadline, if talks heat up and Eric Gordon, potentially does move, and that is the return that we get. I think I don't want it to be. I hope they can coexist together. But at that point, you have a 3 in Johnson and you have a 3 in Martin. Who are you going to invest that money and time into?
And You still have Jae'Sean Tate lurking in the shadows.
Dun, dun, dun.
On that note, Alykhan, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
You can follow me on Twitter at Rockets_insider. Please follow me on TikTok. I'm actually posting film studies. Like, please follow me there. I'm going to post a lot more on TikTok. It's very easy to kind of use that platform to put things out there. So follow me on TikTok, Rockets_insider. I gained like 10 followers after the show last week. I think people are trying to see, is Alykhan actually going to put stuff on there? Well, he did. And I'm going to post some good highlights and other stuff too. So please follow me there. And more film studies to come this week and next week before the next show. See you soon.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked on Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all of your podcast platforms, as well as YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Remember, for today's episode, let me know what you think the hierarchy is for this Houston Rockets team. Let us know what you think about, our thought process of who should the hierarchy be for this Houston Rockets team. Let us know in the YouTube comments. Do read each and every one of those every single day. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.